Conference. There are only countries on the African continent who are members of the Hague Conference at the moment: Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, Burkina Faso, Zambia and South Africa. This next graphic shows you the 150 connected states, and the connected states there are the green states, and you will see that there are significantly more connected states within the African continent, including many that are very close to home here, but not Nigeria. And one of the reasons that when Mandy very kindly asked me to come and speak, that I was keen to speak about the Hague Conference, is I think there are real opportunities for Nigeria in considering becoming a connected state, if not a member of the Hague Conference. So what is the Hague Conference? The Hague Conference defines itself or describes itself as being a melting pot of different legal traditions. It develops and services multilateral legal instruments which respond to global needs. Now, many of you who practice commercial law will have come across some of the Hague Conventions in the context of commercial practice, because there are a broad range of conventions that apply to, for example, taking evidence abroad, on the service of documents, and in various multilateral commercial conventions. But there are also a number of conventions that have particular application in the area of family law. And what the Hague Conference is set out to do is to build bridges between legal systems so that it is possible to reinforce legal certainty and security for individuals and for individual member states. And critically, it is governed and funded by its members. It is an independent organisation. What one needs to understand when you're dealing with Hague Conventions is that it is not about the unification of substantive law. This is something that I think those of us who are in countries, at the moment, we are in the European Union. Come back to me on the 29th of March next year and we'll see whether we're still in the European Union or not. But one of the things that we as 28 member states in the European Union have struggled with is that we all come from very different places culturally. We have very different systems of law. We have very different understandings of the place of law in a society. And one of the great tasks that the European Union have set about is to try and find commonality where you can. And this is very much the root of the Hague Conference. It's about finding where you can areas of commonality so that we can unify the private international law rules that apply between states and for individuals who are moving between states. It does not seek to try and unify the laws themselves. And you will see if you have a look on the Hague Conference website that what is said there is that it's about finding internationally agreed approaches to issues such as the jurisdiction of the courts, applicable law, and the recognition and enforcement of judgments in a wide range of areas, from commercial law and banking law to international civil procedure, and from child protection to matters of marriage and personal status. So if we turn to look at a few of the Hague Conventions that apply specifically in family law, and I'm going to give you 6 of them to start with, but I'm then going to look in particular at 3. The first is the Convention on the Recognition of Divorces and Legal Separations in 1970. And this is about ensuring that if you get a divorce properly within one jurisdiction, that if you move to another jurisdiction, that divorce will be recognised and enforced. We then have the Convention on the Celebration and Recognition of the Validity of Marriages in 1978. The Convention on the Civil Aspect of Child Abduction, 1980, and this is probably the most well-known of the Hague Conventions, and indeed many people simply talk about the Hague Convention, meaning the 1980 Convention, and often people are surprised that there are other conventions as well. This is the most signed up to convention in the world, and it is designed to prevent children being moved across borders and to ensure that children are swiftly returned to the place where they were habitually resident prior to their removal. We then have the convention that Adelaide touched on, which is the Convention on the Protection of Children in Cooperation in Respect of Inter-Country Adoption. These, I should say, all of them have very long names, so they tend to get shortened. So that's the Adoption Convention in 1993. And then finally, we have two more recent conventions, which is, first of all, what's usually called the Child Protection Convention, the 1996 Convention, which I'll talk about in a little more detail, and then the Maintenance Convention in 2007, which deals with the international recovery of child support and other forms of family maintenance. And this is something that is absolutely crucial to many of the people that we're working with. A remedy is only effective if it is a remedy that you can actually access. And if somebody can skip across the border to another country, it doesn't really matter what the order you had said if you can't actually enforce it. The 2007 convention is one, again, I'll touch on in a moment. But I think it is one that is going to take off in its application because it is one that the United States has now signed up to. So that, I think, is hugely significant given the number of people from many of the states that we work with who at some point end up in the US. So I want to touch briefly on the AU agenda for 2063, which I think is fascinating as somebody who is not from this part of the world. It's fascinating to read, and you can see my little pile of paper here. That's not all of it printed out. I did print all of it out, and then I thought I'd need another suitcase for it. There is a huge amount of work that has gone into generation yet, change and things like that. What we have is the vision there of an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena. And there are 7 aspirations that are specifically set out there, 2 of which seem to me to have particular application in the context of family law. The first is aspiration 3, where it is said that the aspiration is an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice and the rule of law. And I think, as Adelaide has so eloquently already told us, human rights are about the rights of women and the rights of children. They are not an amorphous concept that doesn't apply to us. We are humans, and we demand that we are given equal treatment, even if we produce estrogen rather than testosterone. The second aspiration that I think has some relevance here is aspiration 6, which is an Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential offered by people, especially its women and youth, and caring for children. Now, I think this is a really fascinating aspiration because it's one that I have never seen in any other similar document to this, anywhere else in the world, specific reference being made to caring for children. And I think that is a really, really interesting insight into a particular perspective that you have on this continent that is going to stand you in good stead for meeting the goals that you have set yourself in the next generation. And I think that's where family law again comes back into play. It is said in the agenda that critical factors for success are the participation, inclusion and empowerment of citizens. It then goes on to say that that requires the engagement of women in youth and youth in particular, and that is critical. And it notes that when empowered citizens, a responsive civil society, social and economic transformation can become a reality. And then it goes on to note the specific risks and threats, one of which is social and economic inequalities. Now, one of the things I think I'm going to pause here and talk about is the first time I came to Lagos, which was last year. I met a fascinating woman who is a businesswoman here in Lagos, who was interested that I was here as a family lawyer. And I was fascinated that she thought that was interesting, because as a family lawyer, as I say, generally people don't find that very interesting. But what she said to me was, as important and as significant as money, as education, as infrastructure development, all of these things are for her country, that the crucial thing, as she saw it, was that the women of Africa feel safe if something happens to threaten their family. And that until women in Africa, when, as Adelaide said earlier, when we were here yesterday and we went on the march, which was just a delight. It wasn't what I thought I'd be doing on a Wednesday afternoon when it had been snowing the week before. Walking down the road, it was amazing. But one of the things that was interesting, when Mandy had told me that the march was happening, I Googled this, that this was a situation where a young behind him who has failed, or a woman who is beside him who is failing. And I think there are huge issues for us as women here to start to empower, the need to empower each other, and to recognise that, and who knows about the specifics of this particular situation, and I wouldn't dream of talking about it, but if one hypothesises for a moment, if protect our children, I digressed there a little, sorry, are struggling just over the years is to go back to the fundamental texts, go back to the protocols, go back to the charters, go back to the constitutions, because, and this is very obvious when you look at the Maputo protocol, which Edna will talk about, the information is there. The situation has been dealt with, talked about, looked at. It is that it is not being utilised, and we are not demanding the tools there to enable those rights to be fully realised. But there is a huge amount within the Maputo protocol and the agenda that I would say, as a family lawyer, that is of use to you. Now, I'm conscious of the time, and I'm not going to run on. I have given my slides to Mandy, so if anybody would like them, please do feel free to badger her for them, or come and grab me, and I will give you a card, and I can send them to you. You will see on the slides, if you get to them, that I have looked in a little 96 convention, Kafala.
Sorry. And secondly,
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I stand on existing protocol. It is indeed a privilege and honor for me to be here to talk to you today about sustaining women's health. I take a quote from the Guardian newspapers in the UK where they said sustainable development is only possible if women's health is prioritized. And I'm here not to talk about the legal aspects, but real health, your health. As women, we are about you. I'd like to, and abroad, the life expectancy in developed countries is over 80 years. Now, that's a very poor statistic. We have a lot of problems in terms of healthcare. For a long time, we've always had communicable diseases, i.e. infections, malaria, pneumonia, diarrhea, all of those things killing us. But now, because of the globalization and the way that our lives have progressed, we actually now have a problem with an increasing trend of non-communicable diseases, which include things like diabetes, hypertension, and cancer. So what am I here to tell you? Our Doctors on Air program focuses on preventive healthcare. What does that mean? It means you can prevent yourself from getting ill. There are two types of healthcare. Curative, i.e. that which cures you. So when you're sick, you go to the hospital. But why do you want to wait until you're sick? Do you want to be sick? Does anybody here want to be sick? No. So that's why we're talking about how to keep yourself well, how to keep yourself healthy. And it's just important because there's just so many things you can do. And it's all about making the right choices and achieving the right balance in your life. The BMI, it'll be done for you tomorrow, is very important. You need to know how your weight is in relation to your health. Sorry, in relation to your height. You can see the chart at the bottom here. I don't know if this works. Aha. Where do you stand? In Nigeria, our problem is usually on this side of the equation and not the other. There is underweight, which is anorexia, but it's not usually a problem. We have more of a problem with obesity. And why is that? Our normal food is very good food. Our traditional food is excellent food. The way we eat efo and eforiro and so on. But the problem has been an increase in processed foods, an increase in the wrong kinds of foods. A lot of the sugars, the cakes, our immunity. Exercise is key. Blood pressure than other people. We also happen to do, these are some of the risk factors. We take a lot of high salt and other salt substitutes. I must warn you, the white Maggi is a particularly bad one. If you are using that in your food, please try and stop it and try and reduce the amount of salt you take in. And other issues in terms of our lifestyle can cause a lot of problems with high blood pressure. High blood pressure can lead to heart attacks. And the thing you need to know about as women is that we don't always present in the way that other people present. The men present with a classical system in terms of a crushing chest pain radiating down the arm, but women can present differently. They can present just with fatigue. They can present with just breathlessness. They can present with everything. But one key factor you must realize is that anybody who has chest pain on exertion, and when they rest, it is relieved. That's an early sign of heart disease, and you will need to see a doctor with that. Strokes are also caused by high blood pressure. A stroke is caused by a blockage in the brain, that's the blockage, while the heart attack is caused by a blockage within the heart vessels. And it's a huge problem. I'm sure everybody here knows somebody who has had a stroke. Yes? Yes. It's a huge problem. A lot of people die from it, and in fact, women are more likely to die than men from strokes. But it's a very debilitating condition and nobody wants to get it. But the important thing I will tell you that you need to know today is that if you get a stroke early, some of the symptoms can be actually reversed. If you can catch the person when they have a stroke, go to the hospital. Science for diabetes, meals for ourselves within our society. Because I don't know, why does breast cancer occur? People are not sure, but it's caused by a proliferation of cells. What happens in our bodies is that our cells proliferate, i.e. our cells are changing all the time. Some of our cells are dying, some of our cells are being renewed, our skilled cells, all the various cells in our bodies. But there's a mechanism affected, and then in fact there's a huge amount of studies that are now showing that stress actually plays a large part with the dropping of our immunity and development of a lot of conditions. Is anybody here not stressed? Anybody who is not stressed, please put up your hand. Exactly. Life in Nigeria is stressful. Is it even just existing day to day, getting home, getting into the traffic in the morning, getting home, you find out there's no light, there's no water, the pump is not working, there's always issues. And then you add to that your career issues, deadlines to meet, problems, all sorts of issues that come through. But that is something that we then have to live with, and we have to learn how to deal with so that we can ensure we live happy and healthy lives. There are many risk factors for breast cancer. There's some we can control and there's some we cannot control. Those we cannot control include things, the very fact that we're female and women have more breast cancer than men. It's just a fact, okay? We can't change that. The fact that we get older, getting older is a blessing, and the fact that we're getting breast cancer. 34, but they're too young. They want to mark it, they want to track it. So that if you're treating that that cancer, and it's working, it will go down. But if they started the treatment and it's staying, so I don't know, that's what? Stage 3. It's just of breast 2, now they're up to 16 genes. I don't know who knows Angelina Jolie here? Know her? Now there are different forms of screening. There's something called VIA, which I don't like to recommend, particularly in the city, because it has no tissue. And you know what I told you about the importance of looking at the tissue to tell from the cells what it is. The VIA is just a method of smearing and is not as specific. The pap smear is what used to be used, but is no longer used in developed countries. And this is what the pap smear looks like. Can you see this? So you can see that this liquid-based cytology, even just yourself, you're not even a medical person. Which one as a doctor would you prefer to be looking at? Lab? It takes years before it becomes invasive. So usually you can pick it up early. You have a long time to which to pick these. Important that if you have any daughters, because that is all, those two are still major problems in our own environment, but we still need to go a bit further and ensure things like 52 and others are added on for our own people. So, the long and short of it is that I've run through the whole lot of conditions in a very short time. I hope it has been useful to you, but what I recommend is for everyone to know their numbers, okay? You know your bank account number. Hopefully you still know your PIN number, as well as...
Please, thank you. You can sit, because they might want to ask questions. Thank you very much. We're to another. Really have to overlap, because so I'm not going to go on into so much. But let me just share some quotable quotes, and we're from. Well, that would have been. Hello. Okay, that would have been my share. So we would add, having fish, and fish is more difficult to come about, then women's economic activities will get affected. The same thing happens with farming. And with that realization, we went to Rio and we adopted this on the convention Declaration of Sustainable Development. The history of the SDGs and human rights is actually negative development. So at the end of the day, when you're looking at development, you would like to see the protection of human rights as the ultimate realization. At the same time, you cannot protect human rights without that we're better at doing than others. And that's largely my thesis. And I argue that if we do not understand the nature of law and the potentials, including the limits of law for promoting sustainable development, we will hang too much on law. And we will not be very strategic. We will not recognize all the other things. Dr. Akiyode can bear me witness. A few days ago, I had to pull out of a platform to start engaging on the Ochanya case. And I said, and I want to use that as illustration to show how we can do some things better than others. So my colleagues on the platform are asking questions about whether Benue State has passed VAP. I'm saying to myself, I don't care about that VAP, because I believe that the criminal code still provides some opportunity. And I do not want to use all my energy at this time when I'm faced with a case where I want to concern myself with what I will do with VAP. My colleagues who are not lawyers, who cannot use the law that is existing now, pursue that while I try to find the opportunities within the existing law. Then within the discourse, as we were talking, I said, for example, everybody's talking about the autopsy. The autopsy doesn't do much for our case. The autopsy is only going to tell us what caused her death. It does not link the people who are going to, the criminal defendants, to the case. What links them is a forensic examination. So I've been in advocacy, asking our equality, and assume that the Land Use Act treats us equally. We will not be able to advocate. We know what body says it is trite law. It is never trite law, because you can, there is a woman, members of at the core of a new development paradigm is increasingly being echoed within and beyond the human rights community worldwide. With the well-being of current and future generations hanging in the balance, it is crunch time for the future of global development. Simply put, it is not yet uhuru.
Another round of applause. Thank you very much, my professor. She's a mentor. You can see the key was, and when we got to the hospital, we said Lagos, This is Lagos, So the man tried, there was no stretcher, and all that. So they put her in a wheelchair that was not good. Nobody was, we are going to get
so far on that to enforce maternal health. Another resort that we can have is to, of course, approach international courts like the African courts or the ECOWAS courts, and we'll see where it's also doing that. Not that those decisions will become automatically implementable in Nigeria, but over time, if there's enough jurisprudence, we that it is not enforcement in order to ensure the actualization of maternal health and rights in Nigeria. If you look at places like South Africa, for instance, and India, it is because they have a high level of PIL, public interest litigation, that we see those changes, those beautiful decisions that we often refer to. So there's need for PIL. Negligence also is another very key feature. The background in medicine as well, because she's already here. The issue of ignorance of the right bearers. They don't even know that they have civil and political rights. Talk less of socioeconomic rights. Talk less of the one that is now even derived from that, maternal health rights. So there's need for AWLA to continue to engage in education of the grassroots, to let people, to let women know that they have these rights and that there are ways that it can be enforced. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Really, it's not as specific.
Our health systems, for instance, it is important to note that there are some things we can't litigate. Nigeria, for instance, is short of about 500,000 doctors for our population size. You can't litigate that. That's a developmental problem. It means that even if you are in an urban center, the chances that you can find an expert to deal with your issues is extremely slim. If you cannot afford to get to the experts. If you are in the rural areas, I guarantee you your chances of survival of any complication is about 25%. So it's important that we pay attention to those big issues, because often when people say that midwives or doctors, the way they behaved, the way they approach the issues, all those things are issues. But I guarantee you that if you have one doctor in a specialist hospital like Luth dealing with a specific issue and a specific area of expertise, where you should have 200 doctors, there is bound to be malpractice and mistakes. There is a reason why, if you go to Scandinavian countries, or even countries like Cuba, which are small and are considered as developing. Let me just give a quick example. Cuba has 13 million people in it. Nigeria has 190 million. Cuba has more doctors than Nigeria. Cuba has 76,000 doctors. Nigeria has less than 50,000 doctors. 190 million, 13 million. So already you can see where those problems are coming from. Health investment is another key issue. In countries like Nigeria, health investment is hovering, and this is per capita, is hovering around $120, $130 per person per year. In most developed countries, that same health investment is about $1,000 to $2,000. So, get of background issues.
Children should get before they're sexually active. In the UK, they normally give it before the age of 12. So it's very important that if you have any daughter, absolutely free.
Questions? Thank you very much, Ajayi. We're to another session. It looks like there are a lot of speakers today. So we're just going to have a panel, and we'll invite all the speakers to make very quick interventions. Professor Yasenwa is here. I have my Lord here also seated. Can I invite Dr. Akintayo to this side of the table? That's
I wouldn't spend I should have known that we have engaged some debates about when you say women's rights or the human rights of women, are you talking about the human rights? Development was a Senegal men challenging, and that's what I want to leave us with. The SDGs are the operational plan. We will give this, and I argue that myself with what civil begin to. We will not decided that separate, not arguing about an African forensic exam minutes from there. Our trust fund community.
Thank you for the presentation. So, and I'm also directing this. I'll just use 5 minutes to talk about what I need to talk to. Then we ask the other people on the table to respond to a few issues. Then we'll go back to plenary. Now, talking about unsettling the law. So I want to talk around some of the things we have done as a group of women lawyers, also in Nigeria here, under the auspices of Women Advocates Research and Documentation Center, to see whether we can change things around, particularly sexual and reproductive rights. So I'm going to be talking about twins. When she got there, I was in their course, who was using a particular hospital, ran back, because I had never seen that before. So by the time they had the baby crying, so the nurses came out from the hospital. So the first thing was for them to open the gate, and they started looking for the best key. They have that where they had a bunch of keys, trying to get, the keys and all that. So eventually they found the key. So they were able to bring the woman out. So they brought the anti-garment, I think shock garment for her to wear. The nurses could not help. So the husband was one putting 2 legs in one, and all that. So he was able to bring her out, and when they got there, only to realize that the emergency room is on the 3rd floor, So it was difficult for them to even get, the woman there. This is Lagos, This is Lagos, So the man tried, there was no stretcher, and all that. So they put her in a wheelchair that was not good. So the man carried the woman and took her to the thing is for you to take.
Going so far. The last point I want to make in that regard is that we cannot, like Proverbs said, we cannot keep on heaping all hopes on human rights, because like our students will say, who that one has helped. Look at South Africa, for instance, that have constitutionalized their socioeconomic rights. Still, we'll see that it is not yet uhuru in those kind of places. So there's limitation to heaping all of our hopes on the enforcement or access to justice for the women folk through the law or through human rights. So we need to continue to push the boundaries of change through other methods, through protest, through freedom of expression, through political action, and the rest of them. One other challenge that I see with regard to maternal health is the issue of poverty of the general people, especially the women folk. And we all know that it takes a lot to litigate any issue in court. So there's need for training of public interest lawyers that is going to be involved in public interest litigations in order to ensure the actualization of maternal health and rights in Nigeria. If you look at places like South Africa, for instance, and India, it is because they have a high level of PIL, public interest litigation, that we see those changes, those beautiful decisions that we often refer to. So there's need for PIL. Negligence also is another very key feature or challenge to maternal health rights in Nigeria. Negligence of doctors, medical workers, and the rest of them. So there's need for negligence law experts in Nigeria, especially those with a background in medicine as well. So
So by 4:30 we should be able to leave here. So let me quickly call, even before then, let me call the other speaker, Mr. Sankore, who is not a lawyer, but who is a journalist, but has done a lot of work on issues of SDG, maternal health.
The chances that you can find an expert, the way they approach the issues, all those things are issues. But I guarantee you that if you have one doctor in a specialist hospital like Luth dealing with a specific issue and a specific area of expertise where you should have 200 doctors, there is bound to be malpractice and mistakes. There is a reason why, if you go to Scandinavian countries or even countries like Cuba, which are small and are considered as developing. Let me just give a quick example. Cuba has 13 million people in it. Nigeria has 190 million. Cuba has more doctors than Nigeria. Cuba has 76,000 doctors. Nigeria has less than 50,000 doctors. 190 million. Health investment is another key issue. In countries like Nigeria, health investment is hovering, and this is per year. You can litigate. If you do class action and you go to court and you challenge the government and you say, as a result of your overall poor investment in health care. Why is this important? To engage issues around maternal health or maternal mortality. These are the kind of things that we need to stop. And by the way, it's not just in the north. In Bayelsa, it's 50%. So it's 1 in 2. Those kind of statistics are really, really important for us to note. Now, I just want to emphasize on issues around forced child marriage before I come to an end. A colleague mentioned cervical cancer earlier. If you are supposed to vaccinate against cervical cancer before already being violated where you stay, is that she can share some of the data with you. She can make the data available to you, the whole presentation which I had lined up, so that we can see the big picture. So if we want to deal with the issues, we need to engage governments. We need to engage the National Assembly. Going to court to litigate specific cases emboldens people, like adolescent pregnancy. There are countries you go to, an adolescent pregnancy prevalence is 3 or 4%. In Nigeria, there are states you go to, and adolescent pregnancy is as high as 63 or 64%. Why is this important? Because the younger you are when you get pregnant, the higher the possibility of your dying from pregnancy-related causes. So in terms of preventing the circumstances that lead to teenage girls becoming pregnant, to go to and what
to bring data into some of the realities.
We didn't buy her no ticket, we didn't put her in the hotel, everything all by herself. Awesome, right? Meanwhile, some of our speakers, trust me, some of them, the ones that are not here, oh, we can't come except sponsor our trip to Lagos. And I'm like, oh, we're NGO, we are still looking for money. Oh, well, I can't come. And then the ones we even said, okay, we'll try. They said, oh, it has to be first class. We're coming. We really appreciate you, Rachel. God bless you. Like I said, get back home, the fat briefs are waiting. Now pay off for all this with extras.
Want to engage issues around maternal health or maternal mortality, These are the kind of things that we need to stop. And by the way, it's not just in the north. In Bayelsa, it's 50%. So it's 1 in 2. Those kind of statistics are really, really important for us to note. Now, I just want to emphasize on issue 99%. You have no legal framework. We need to engage government.
Oh, we can't except sponsor our trip to Lagos.